thin fog clings to the cobbled streets of a village abandoned by fortune, curling around the angles of shattered roofs and hollow windows like a reluctant ghost. The scent of wet straw, pungent and sour, hangs thick in the air, merging with the faint iron tang of rusted farm tools left where they fell, forgotten by calloused hands. Silence presses heavy over the alleys, broken only by the scuff of small feet and the whisper of wind through broken shutters. In the shadowed corners, children huddle beneath the thatched eaves, bodies pressed close to one another for warmth that the world refuses to provide. Their eyes, wide and hollow, dart from shadow to shadow, scanning for scraps of bread or any hint of mercy from a village that has long stopped offering it freely. Each cough echoes sharply, bouncing off the damp stones like a warning bell, a cruel rhythm that marks not hours but hunger and the slow, insistent passing of days. The wind whistles through the fractured walls, carrying the distant, labored creak of a mill wheel grinding in vain. Its sound is ghostly, like the village itself grinding against the weight of poverty, the machinery of survival turning empty. Nearby, manor kitchens simmer with coarse gruel meant for livestock, thick and uninviting. Pots bubble over iron flames, untasted by those who could not pay the toll of the tollkeeper. And in this silent hunger, the children feel the absence of abundance as sharply as a lash. A boy no more than 7 stands beneath the skeletal beams of a crumbling barn, tracing his small fingers along the rough wood. His imagination swells with the warmth of a loaf he will never taste, its imagined aroma richer than the cold, damp air that bites at his cheeks. He swallows, the empty ache in his stomach mingling with a strange reverence for the dream of bread, a ritual as intimate as it is futile. His companions whisper to each other in hushed tones, stories stitched from memory, grief, and longing, narratives that bind them against a world that would see them vanish. Frost glimmers on rotting leaves outside, fragile and transient, catching the dim light as if to remind the village of what once flourished and could not endure. It clings to every surface like hope itself, thin, brittle, easily crushed. Shadows pool beneath the eaves, and from the corner of his eye, the boy glimpses a small sparrow alighting on the edge of a broken trough. It pecks at invisible crumbs, delicate and purposeful, a quiet emblem of survival. Its flight is tentative, aware of danger, and yet persistent, a mirror to the children, clinging to the margins of life with tiny, trembling insistence. Inside the barn, the air smells of mold and straw, dampened further by the recent rain. Each creak of the beams is a voice, telling of age and decay, of abandonment. The children press closer, seeking warmth, seeking solidarity. Their whispered stories carry the cadence of their ancestors, tales of harvests and feasts, of fires that once burned bright in hearths, now reduced to embered memories. They speak not merely to remember, but to hold back the silence that creeps over the village like a tide. A dog, thin and gaunt, slinks past the ruins of a collapsed wall, sniffing at shadows as though searching for the past. Its ribs cut sharp lines beneath its matted fur, and yet its eyes are steady, unbroken by despair. Life persists fragile and stubborn, in forms both human and animal. Outside, the wind lifts loose straw, twirling it into eddies, and in the motion, the boy imagines the dance of grain in fields that no longer exist, a fleeting vision of abundance beyond the fog. From the manor house above, a faint clang rings, a metal pot striking stone, followed by the soft murmur of voices, distant and unseeing, of the children below. The world of wealth and comfort continues oblivious, moving through corridors perfumed with cooking fires, while the village's veins run dry with neglect. Hunger has a sound the children have learned, the shuffle of bare feet on damp stone, the cough that refuses to be stilled, the sigh that rises like smoke from their hollowed bodies. The boy presses his palms to the cold beams, imagining their warmth, remembering the hands of his mother brushing away lice from his hair, the rough but loving fingers of a father long gone. Memories are heavier than hunger, and yet they offer something to cling to, a tether in the fog. His sister leans close, her lips brushing his ear, whispering the tale of a wheat field she saw in a dream, stalks golden under a sun that will never rise over this village again. They share a breath of hope, however small, a defiance of the silence that seeks to swallow them whole. A shadow passes across the wall, and for a heartbeat, the children freeze, imagining marauders, wolves, the endless parade of threats that have stalked them since birth. The wind answers with a mournful sigh, rattling broken shutters and sending frost sparkling across splintered boards. Outside, the sparrow flits into the gray light, gone as quietly as it arrived. Its absence leaves the boy with the weight of impermanence, the knowledge that survival is fleeting, contingent on fragile threads too easily severed. Night gathers fully now, folding the village under a shawl of mist and cold. Candles flicker in distant windows, brief defiance against the dark, while the children huddle in the barn's embrace. Hunger gnaws still, insistent and patient, yet beneath it, a quiet pulse of life persists. In their whispers, in the small acts of shared warmth, in the stories of bread and sunlit fields, they resist the stillness that threatens to claim them. Above, the sky darkens further, stars veiled by smoke and cloud. Somewhere, a bell tolls, uncertain, lonely, marking the passage of hours, of days, of a winter that seems eternal. The boy closes his eyes, imagines the warmth of a hearth, the smell of bread baking, and for one suspended moment, he believes. Then, as the fog thickens, he opens his eyes to the dim, glimmering frost, the silent village waiting, the world beyond indifferent. And in the hush, in the breath of wind through broken shingles, he feels the weight of tomorrow pressing close. The small, trembling pulse of hope remains, fragile as frost on rotting leaves, as the village drifts ever toward silence, yet refuses, just yet, to surrender fully. The morning mist clings to the stones of the half-ruined abbey, a damp shroud that muffles the world in gray silence. No bells call the faithful, no incense spirals into prayer. Smoke rises only from the hearths of the destitute, curling like fragile specters into the frost-bitten air. The wind presses through broken windows, whispering of prayers long abandoned, carrying with it the cold bite of winter that seeps into bones and hearts alike. A girl kneels at the edge of a stagnant pool, her fingers tracing the glassy surface. She watches the water tremble beneath her touch, seeing in its dark mirror the reflection of a bell tower whose bronze has blackened with age, the metal eaten by time and neglect. Around her, other children drift like shadows between the cracked stones, carrying empty baskets, their stomachs taut with hunger, their eyes hollow yet wary. Each movement is careful, deliberate, a dance of survival choreographed by despair. The world hums with absence, of warmth, of laughter, of a God who seems to have turned a blind eye. Through the narrow streets, a baker's cart rattles, horse hooves clattering against frost-cracked stones. The aroma of bread, fresh and golden, drifts over the children, teasing them, mocking the hollow emptiness of their bellies. They reach for nothing, for they know this scent is a promise they cannot claim, a reminder of what has slipped forever from their grasp. One child bites her lip, tasting the bread in her imagination, and for a moment, she almost believes in the warmth of an oven she has never touched. Inside the abbey, shadows stretch like the long fingers of some ancient specter, crawling across cracked tiles and crumbling walls. Candlelight flickers weakly, borrowed from a priest too frail to hold vigil, trembling with each breath that shudders through his chest. The silence is not empty. It is alive, heavy with the ghosts of voices that once filled the cloisters. A broken lute leans against a wall, strings snapped and silent, an echo of laughter and music now vanished. The girl lingers near it, her hand hovering over the fractured wood, imagining a melody that might bring life back into this hollowed place. But no song rises, only the faint rustle of her own shifting heartbeat. The children kneel in mimicry of prayer, murmuring words they have not heard since the last Mass, their voices brittle in the cold. They pray to saints who have forgotten them, to a heaven that seems distant and unkind, their small bodies shivering in ragged tunics. The air smells of damp stone, of smoke, of the faint, persistent decay that lingers where faith has faltered. A rat scurries across the floor, unnoticed yet alive, its tiny claws scratching against the worn stone. In that fleeting instant, the girl imagines herself as a bird, breaking free from the earthbound sorrow, her wings brushing against the clouds of memory and despair. She soars above the abbey, above the empty streets, above the ache of empty stomachs and abandoned prayers, tasting the impossible freedom of the sky. Yet gravity pulls her back. Hunger weighs on her shoulders, the cold nips at her fingers, and the shadow of the abbey stretches long and unyielding. The children move as one with the silence, their steps careful, their bodies carrying the invisible chains of starvation. One boy crouches near the edge of the pool, scooping a handful of water, and as it dribbles through his fingers, he imagines it flowing not from stone and ruin but from some hidden spring of hope. Hope here is a brittle thing, delicate as frost on a window pane, easily shattered, yet stubborn enough to cling, whispering of a life that could be more than survival. Outside, the morning wind carries the distant toll of a bell, faint and uneven. Perhaps it is a dream, a memory of when the abbey's stone rang with ritual, when voices rose in unison and the faithful knelt without fear. The girl lifts her gaze, watching the haze of mist twist around the tower, imagining the world beyond these walls. Fields lying fallow, forests stripped bare, villages shuddered against the bite of famine. She sees the weight of human failure, the slow, relentless erosion of life, and she feels it as sharply as the chill against her skin. The abbey's stones whisper stories in their cracks. Here, a monk once carved his initials into the wall, perhaps in pride, perhaps in longing. There, a torch burned too close to a tapestry, leaving a scorched memory of colors now faded to ash. The girl traces these marks, imagining the lives that brushed against these surfaces, lives that loved, laughed, mourned, and vanished. Each footprint in the dust is a testament, each broken tile a chronicle of despair and endurance. She wonders if anyone will remember them, if anyone will see the struggle etched into these walls and understand the hunger, the cold, the small, persistent hope. The children gather around her, drawn by the silent magnetism of shared suffering. They are a constellation of emptiness, each small flame of life flickering in unison, fragile yet stubborn. They speak without words, their gestures conveying the unspoken covenant of survival. Together, they form a tapestry of human resilience, stitched from hunger, fear, and the longing for something beyond the gray monotony of ruin. The girl rises, her feet leaving ripples in the stagnant water, and turns toward the outer gate of the abbey. The mist swirls, wrapping her like a cloak, blurring the line between earth and sky. She imagines the world beyond, and for a brief, defiant moment, she believes in the possibility of warmth, of bread, of a song rising from the ruins. Yet the cold remains, the hunger gnaws, and the abbey watches silently, a relic of faith and failure. As dawn stretches its fragile fingers across the horizon, the first light strikes the bell tower, illuminating the blackened bronze like a wound opened to the sky. The girl watches, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air, her heart a rhythm of fear and hope intertwined. In that light, the abbey is neither dead nor alive, neither wholly despairing nor entirely forgiving. It exists in the tension between what has been lost and what might yet be found. And in the hush of that fragile morning, a question lingers like smoke over stone. Who will remember the children kneeling in the cold? Who will carry the echoes of laughter and prayer into a world that seems determined to forget? The girl steps forward, her reflection rippling in the water, a ghost of what is and a promise of what might be. Her wings are invisible, yet her spirit lifts, brushing the edges of memory, brushing the edges of hope. The world feels immense and unbearably close, a delicate balance of hunger, hope, and forgotten grace. Each stone, each shadow, each trembling voice is a testament to endurance. And as the mist begins to recede, the abbey exhales a breath long held, readying itself for the next chapter, where survival will meet courage, despair will touch love, and the faintest flame of possibility will ignite in the hearts of the living. A dense fog clings to the valley, curling like smoke through the hollowed remnants of an old manor. Stone walls, pocked with moss and time, loom like silent sentinels, their shuttered windows gaping down with hollow eyes that have seen too many winters. The ground is soft, soaked by the relentless drizzle, and the children wander barefoot, their small feet sinking into mud that swallows their prints almost as soon as they are made. Each step is a protest against the cold, a fragile assertion of life in a world that has long forgotten them. The air smells faintly of smoke, a distant hearth somewhere over the hills, promising warmth the children will never taste. It is a scent both cruel and necessary, a whisper of comfort in a valley ruled by hunger and the slow, grinding passage of time. A boy stoops by the remains of a collapsed wall, fingers brushing through damp earth until they close over a rusted key. He lifts it, turns it over in his hand, imagining a chest brimming with grains, a hidden pantry, some treasure that could fill empty bellies. His eyes glint in the gray light, hope fragile but stubborn, like the moss climbing the stones around him. The other children circle him, silent, their faces pale against the mist, each carrying their own ghosts. Parents lost to fire and famine, villages razed in the march of lords and soldiers, knights shivering beneath the scant protection of tattered cloaks. They are shadows of a childhood stolen, yet shadows that cling desperately to one another, drawing invisible threads of resilience across the ruins. From the monastery across the river, bells toll lazily, marking hours that mean nothing to those who forage among refuse-strewn streets. The sound travels like a heartbeat, distant and indifferent, threading through the fog to brush against the children's ears. One girl stops, pressing her hands to her chest, feeling the slow, hollow rhythm of her own hunger in tandem with the solemn chimes. She whispers a name, long forgotten by those who remain, and the fog swallows it, carrying it away across the valley. Each toll, a reminder of what endures, of what remains untouched by decay or sorrow. Yet its indifference cuts sharper than any blade. A crow circles overhead, black wings slicing through the gray as if to mark the air with a warning. Its cry breaks the hush of the morning, stark and accusing, and the children glance upward, half in awe, half in fear. The bird is a companion to the forsaken, a witness to their small triumphs and quiet defeats. It glides above the remnants of a world that once demanded fealty, a world that now bows only to frost and silence. Its shadow drifts over them, a reminder that the valley is not empty. It is watched, catalogued in feathers and eyes that know no pity. The boy with the key rises, brushing mud from his knees. He imagines doors, Secret rooms. A world beyond hunger. His fingers tighten around the cold metal, imagining it unlocking not only stores of food, but the invisible barriers that have kept him small, hungry, and unseen. Around him, the other children move in small circles, tracing paths through the ruins that have become their maps of survival. They carry fragments of stories that are too heavy for their young shoulders. Nights spent listening for soldiers, the distant sound of fire consuming what they once called home, whispers of parents' voices swallowed by smoke and ash. And yet they move, as though the mud and stone beneath them, the wind slicing across the valley, demand persistence. They trace invisible lines across the forgotten land, fragile but unbroken. Rain hammers the roofless halls of the manor, dripping from jagged parapets into puddles that hiss as they swell and merge. Each droplet is a metronome, a slow but relentless counting of hours, days, lifetimes. The children pause, listening. The sound is a rhythm older than memory, older than the stone itself. It carries in it the weight of centuries, the unspoken lessons of endurance. Survive, resist, endure. One boy dips a hand into the puddle, letting it run over his fingers, a small, liquid reminder that the world still responds to touch, that existence persists even when it is unkind. Around him, silence rises and falls, broken only by the occasional murmur, the scrape of bare feet, the distant tolling of bells, and the caw of the crow that arcs across the foggy sky. The frost bites at exposed skin, painting it with red filigree, leaving the cheeks and noses of the children raw and shining in the dim morning. Breaths rise in clouds, fragile and fleeting, mingling with the fog until no distinction remains between air and vapor. The children huddle instinctively, small bodies pressed together beneath cloaks that are too thin, too tattered, but there's none the less. They share warmth, hope, and the fragile comfort of presence, as though connection alone could stave off the cold that penetrates bone and memory alike. They whisper names, small prayers, and the soft reassurances that only children can give. You're not alone. Not yet. Not today. A shadow moves along the ruined walls, perhaps a figure, perhaps the imagination of a mind too hungry for stories. The boy with the key tightens his grip, heart pounding in rhythm with the tolling bells and the crow's flight. The ruins seem alive, breathing with the ghosts of those who came before. Each step echoes in the halls, and each echo carries a question. How long before the valley remembers them? How long before it forgets again? And yet, beneath the weight of hunger, beneath the fog and frost, they walk, press forward, imagine, and insist upon life in the most stubborn way imaginable. By the river, the water flows with a crystalline cruelty, untainted by the valley's decay. It moves swiftly, indifferent to the children who peer into its surface, watching their own reflection warp and blur. The sound of water over stone adds another layer to the rhythm, the ticking clock of survival, relentless and impartial. They stare into it, seeing themselves not as victims, but as inheritors of a world that has stripped everything yet cannot strip imagination, cannot strip hope, cannot strip the stubborn courage of small, starving hands that clutch rusted keys as if they were talismans. The fog deepens as the day moves forward, swallowing walls and river alike. The children pause on a ridge, peering down at the valley that is at once a prison and a home. They are still shadows among shadows, yet in their eyes flickers the faintest fire of persistence. Every footfall in the mud, every shiver beneath a cloak, every echo of the crow's wing, every toll of the distant bell marks the passage of their endurance. They are the remnants of lost worlds, yet within them, the fragile architecture of resilience rises, an invisible network of hope, stubborn and unyielding. The valley may have forgotten them, the manor may crumble into memory, but they remain. And in the stillness, in the quiet communion of the forsaken, they draw a fragile map across the fog, tracing the invisible line between survival and despair, between loss and something still worth living for. The wind rises suddenly, brushing over moss and mud, and carries with it the scent of smoke, of water, and of the unseen hearths still burning in distant homes. It is a reminder that the world is larger than ruin, larger than hunger, and that even in its indifference, life persists. The children huddle, clutching each other and the key, watching the crow vanish into the mist. Silence falls again, heavy but not absolute, holding within it the promise that the story does not end here, that tomorrow, and the next day, will still demand courage, imagination, and the stubborn defiance of young hearts unbroken. The first light of dawn strikes the fractured edges of the granary, a sliver of gold against rotted timber. Dust motes hover in the cold air, drifting like tiny spirits exhaled by the earth itself, each one a silent witness to the decay. Through the warped planks, children slip and slide, barefoot and nimble, drawn by the hollow promise of scraps among the rat-eaten sacks. Their stomachs groan with emptiness, but their eyes burn with a stubborn spark, the same spark that refuses to be swallowed by despair. Beyond the granary, the village awakens in fractured rhythm. Black smoke threads its way skyward from crooked chimneys, curling like dark prayers into the pale morning. Dogs bark at shadows, their teeth catching the weak sunlight, while the miller's wheel creaks and groans, spinning grain into nothingness, abandoned by hands too few or too weary to claim it. A cold wind sweeps across the square, carrying the faint metallic tang of frostbitten iron and the scent of damp, sodden earth, pungent and alive with decay. By the stagnant well, a girl crouches, her small frame hunched against the frost. The water's surface shivers as a stone strikes, breaking her reflection into jagged shards. Her hair is matted with straw, strands stiff and unyielding from the cold, and her hands are raw, cracked and red like the edges of autumn leaves pressed too long against frozen ground. She murmurs names no one will answer, a litany of siblings lost to hunger, to disease, to the cruel turning of seasons. Her voice is almost swallowed by the wind, but it lingers like smoke, stubborn and insistent. In the courtyards, the shadows stretch long, swallowing corners of stone and wood that once held laughter and toil. Each abandoned hearth, each collapsed wall, is a testament to lives that vanished quietly, leaving the world hollowed and echoing. The church bell tolls somewhere distant, each strike measured, indifferent. It marks the passage of time with a solemn, metallic heartbeat, indifferent to grief, indifferent to hope. Yet even here, in the bitter silence, warmth flickers in fragile ways. A hand reaches out, pale and trembling, to steady a sibling or friend. Bread, hard and molded, is shared in stolen moments of trust. A laugh, uncertain and trembling, flits between the children like the wings of a moth, fragile yet persistent against the weight of the world. Each act, no matter how small, pushes back against the oblivion that gathers in the corners. They carve their story into the soil, into the frost, leaving marks of defiance that even death hesitates to erase. A boy clambers atop the granary's skeletal remains, peering over the rooftops at the fields beyond, long since stripped bare by hunger and frost. He whispers to himself, naming invisible enemies and conjuring invisible friends. His breath rises in faint clouds, and for a moment, the world seems to pause, listening. Each movement, each whispered word, carries hope like a fragile ember, waiting for a wind to catch it, waiting to ignite. Inside a nearby hut, a woman bends over a hearth, hands trembling as she stokes the feeble fire. The smoke curls upward, a thin gray veil that mingles with the morning mist outside. Her eyes are haunted by yesterday, yet they linger on the present. The warmth she can offer, the morsel she can spare. In her careful gestures, the children see a map of survival, a code written in ash and soot, teaching them patience, cunning, and resilience. Even the animals sense the quiet suffering. Chickens pick at frost-hardened soil, wings tucked tight to their sides. Dogs circle cautiously, wary yet drawn to the human's flickering life. Crows, black and gleaming, wheel above in circles, their cries slicing through the stillness, a reminder that death and scavenging are never far behind. The children learn to move like shadows, to whisper like wind, to claim small victories that the world might overlook but that sustain them nonetheless. At midday, the wind shifts, carrying the scent of thawing earth and the faint promise of rain. It brushes against frozen faces and raw fingers, and for a heartbeat, it feels almost like renewal. The children pause, their eyes catching the movement of distant leaves, the tremor of a cat stalking a mouse. In this brief moment, hunger is not a gnawing emptiness but a pulse, a rhythm that drives them forward, shaping the contours of courage and fear alike. Even as the day grows, the granary's shadow stretches across the village, a dark reminder of what has been lost. The walls creak, the timbers groan, yet in their decay, there is beauty, a story written in lines and cracks, in the very dust that dances in the sunlight. The girl by the well lifts her gaze, the reflection broken but still there. She imagines hands she cannot touch, voices she cannot hear, and still, she rises, steps forward, learning the geometry of survival on uneven ground. As the sun dips toward the horizon, long fingers of light slide across the village, illuminating a world half ruined, half alive. Shadows gather in corners, and the church bell tolls once more, echoing over empty streets, over broken roofs, over hearts that still beat fiercely. And in the small acts, the shared bread, the whispered names, the stolen laughter, the children leave traces of themselves, fragile yet enduring. Their story is not written in parchment or stone, but in frost-cracked hands, in the pulse of hunger and hope, in the soft, stubborn warmth that persists even when the world seems bent on forgetting. The night will come, as it always does, but for now, the dawn lingers, a breath held over a village that trembles yet refuses to fall entirely silent. And in that fragile light, something endures, an ember of life, flickering, persistent, waiting for the wind that will carry it forward into tomorrow. The storm howls with the fury of unseen spirits, rattling the thin wooden walls of the poorhouse perched at the forest's edge. Rain lashes against the roof in relentless drums, each strike echoing like a warning sent from the sky. Wind squeezes through the cracks, curling around the corners of the room with a moan that seems almost human, whispering through the timbers as if it knows the secrets of every child huddled inside. The air is thick with soot, the bitter tang of sweat clinging to the backs of their necks, mingling with the faint decay of straw mats pressed beneath fragile bodies. Outside, the forest exhales the scent of wet pine and rotting leaves, the damp earth groaning under the weight of the storm, the trees bowing to its might. A boy lies curled on a mat of straw, his small hand tracing the grooves of the splintered table beside him. His fingers linger over the wood as if the carved scratches could bring forth memories that are more real than the hunger gnawing at his belly. He dreams of porridge thick with honey, dripping like liquid gold across his tongue, and roasted meat glistening with fat, the aroma so vivid it almost fills the cramped room. A hunger sharper than any storm rips quietly through him, yet he swallows it down with the practiced restraint learned over years of absence. Around him, the other children lie in silence, their bodies taut and trembling beneath threadbare blankets. They share unspoken gestures, small nods or the twitch of an eye, a language woven from scarcity and understanding. In this room, where voices are muted and laughter has long since fled, communication is a delicate dance of survival. Beyond the walls, the village is almost absent, swallowed by the storm's wrath. The church bells toll unevenly, their hollow clangs lost in the roar of wind and rain. The priest, who once brought solace with chants and whispered prayers, has left the parish untended, leaving behind only cracked candles that flicker like ghosts in empty pews. No footsteps echo in the stone aisles. No whispered absolution drifts across cold marble. Even the rain seems to mock the absence, drumming against the steeple like the hand of a judge, relentless and accusatory. The boy's gaze follows the movements of a small fox at the edge of the clearing, its russet fur soaked, paws skidding on wet leaves, agile and untouchable. It disappears into the shadows as quickly as it appears, a flicker of life that mocks the stagnant despair inside. Shadows stretch long across the room, bending over the sleeping children like protective spirits. The dim glow of a single lantern trembles on the wall, casting distorted shapes that sway with the storm. Every gust of wind presses against the door, and the children flinch as if the world outside might finally claim them. And yet, in this darkness, there is a fragile thread that binds them. Not warmth or plenty, but endurance. It is a quiet solidarity, an invisible tether that allows them to persist where others have abandoned them. Each breath, each shiver, each shared glance becomes a small rebellion against a world that refuses to see them. The boy closes his eyes, imagining the warmth of a fire that exists only in memory, the golden glow dancing across the rough-hewn walls, chasing the damp shadows into corners. He imagines a mother's hand brushing hair from a fevered brow, a father's voice humming over the crackle of burning logs, the sense of safety that no longer belongs to him. Outside, the storm rages with undiminished force, but here, in the small cocoon of their shared suffering, a tenuous peace holds sway. It is the kind that demands patience, that exacts a toll in small sacrifices, but rewards with the quiet knowledge that they are not entirely alone. The wind rattles the window frame again, more insistently this time, and the children stir. One rolls onto her side, her face pale in the lantern light, eyes half closed and filled with the weight of dreams deferred. Another sits up, knees drawn to his chest, listening to the rain as if it might carry secrets from a distant world. Their breaths mingle in the cold air, a symphony of human fragility. In this room, there are no heroes or villains, only small hearts beating against a universe indifferent to their suffering. Each one has learned to navigate the unseen dangers of hunger, the cold, and despair, mapping the landscape of endurance with an almost instinctive precision. Through the window, the forest seems alive, trees bending and twisting as if trying to whisper guidance to the children within. The boy imagines himself slipping through the rain, feet finding purchase in mud, paws like the fox's, heart racing with the possibility of freedom, if only for a fleeting moment. He imagines tasting berries hidden beneath fallen leaves, the sweetness of life in a world otherwise dominated by need. The storm is no longer just a threat. It is a companion, testing him, teaching him, reminding him that even in hardship, there is movement, there is motion, there is survival. Silence falls like a soft shroud after the storm's temporary crescendo. The children, one by one, succumb to an uneasy sleep, their small bodies curling beneath blankets that are more shadow than warmth. The boy lingers at the edge of consciousness, eyes tracing the dark corners of the room, where shadows seem to pulse like living things. He imagines the fox slipping past him again, agile and untouchable, a symbol of what might exist beyond these walls. And in that image, a fragile hope is born, not a promise of abundance, but the certainty that life, however small and fleeting, continues. The storm eases, but its echo lingers in every corner of the poorhouse. Drips of water collect in puddles on the wooden floor, the sound faint but persistent, a reminder that the world remains in motion outside their fragile sanctuary. The boy exhales, a slow, deliberate release of tension, and curls tighter into his mat. He knows tomorrow will bring the same hunger, the same cold, the same absence of mercy. Yet he also knows with a stubborn clarity that he will endure, that they all will. For now, the shadows have retreated slightly, the fox has vanished into the forest, and the children sleep. And in that quiet, trembling moment, the poorhouse itself seems to breathe. Walls creak under the weight of history, the straw sighs beneath small bodies, and the air holds a fragile promise. Life persists not in abundance, but in the stubbornness of the living to endure, to bear witness, to keep breathing against a world that turns away. Outside, the forest whispers in the aftermath of the storm, leaves glistening in water, mud soft under the touch of rain. Within, the children huddle closer, hearts beating in silent agreement. And as dawn edges over the horizon, pale and uncertain, one thought threads through the room like a quiet prayer. They have survived the night, and with survival comes the fragile, shimmering possibility of tomorrow. The riverbank is slick with ice, a glassy sheen that catches the pale light of a winter morning and fractures it into shards across the mud. Reeds bow under frost, brittle and whispering, their whispers carried by a wind that shreds the thin cloth of hope from the children who huddle beneath them. Their eyes, wide and alert, reflect the gray sweep of sky above, scanning the water's edge as if it might betray a predator or a passing soul willing to offer warmth. They move like shadows, crouched low, their movements deliberate, silent, a choreography learned from hunger and fear alike. A boy kneels, breaking the crust of stale bread with trembling fingers, each fragment falling into frozen mud and disappearing as though swallowed by the earth itself. Even this meager offering is a feast in imagination, a banquet conjured from deprivation. He tastes it slowly, savoring the faint tang of age, of survival, letting each chew become a prayer for strength, for tomorrow. Around him, the reeds bend and sway, murmuring secrets in a language he almost understands, stories carried by wind and frost that speak of exile, of ancestors wandering these very waters, of endurance etched into the marrow of every soul who came before. Beyond the river, smoke curls lazily from chimneys, spiraling toward clouds that do not promise rain but warmth, hearths, and kitchens where meat simmers and bread rises golden. To these hidden children, such sustenance is a horizon they can see but never reach, a life encased behind walls and locked doors. The church on the hill rises above the settlement, a monument of stone and devotion, its spire clawing at the sky, a beacon to the faithful. Yet the doors remain closed, the silence inside louder than any voice outside, a reminder that the world has decided who is worthy of sanctuary and who is to remain invisible, reduced to whispers in reeds and frostbitten mud. The boy's hands are small, pale, each line on his palm a map of his survival. His fingers bear the chill of river water, his nails blackened with frost and soil, proof of hours spent scavenging and hiding. Lips the color of bruised petals betray hunger more eloquently than words ever could. Beneath the ribs, hollowness hums like a secret drumbeat, a rhythm that guides his steps, his caution, his vigilance. Each child's story is written not in paper or speech but in these silent markers, in the stoop of a shoulder, the twitch of an ear, the wary dart of an eye. A heron lifts from the water, wings slicing the air with delicate authority, a ghostly sentinel against the gray horizon. Its motion is almost sacred, each beat of feathered wings a testament to fragile determination. The boy watches it rise, heart tight, and in that silent ascent, he finds a mirror of his own struggle. Survival is a quiet, patient act, often unnoticed, yet monumental in its persistence. The heron arcs over frozen mud and reeds, and the boy imagines it carrying his prayers, his hunger, the secret songs of his ancestors, up toward the clouds that do not weep but only observe. Hunger shapes the world of these children. It sharpens their senses until the smallest movement, a ripple in the water, a rustle in the reeds, becomes a symphony of warning or promise. The scent of smoke, the glint of a distant knife, the faint tremor of voices carried across ice and stone. Each is observed, catalogued, and remembered. Memories themselves are treasured as sustenance. The taste of bread once shared, the warmth of a hand held in fear, a lullaby hummed in a different life. Even despair becomes a companion, its presence constant but strangely instructive, teaching patience, teaching observation, teaching the sacred geometry of survival. The reeds shiver in agreement, bowing as though acknowledging the stories etched in every cautious footstep. The children imagine songs carried on the wind, voices of those who came before them murmuring from riverbanks and high hills. These songs are not words but feelings, echoes of faith and fear, of exile and home, of love lost and tenacity found. The boy closes his eyes briefly, and in that darkness behind his lids, he sees a river not frozen but flowing, each current a thread linking him to past generations who knew the same cold, the same hunger, the same urgent necessity to hide and to endure. Yet for all the shadows there is light. The boy glimpses it in the soft shimmer of frost on a reed, in the delicate lift of a feather caught in the wind, in the way smoke curls from chimneys to meet the sky as if reaching for something unattainable but beautiful. Even the hollow of his stomach cannot erase the awe of these small, fragile miracles. They are reminders that life insists upon itself, that the world continues to pulse with rhythm and chance, and that he too is a part of that pulse, however small, however invisible to those who sit warm behind closed doors. Voices break the wind, a whisper carried too far, a shout muffled by distance. The boy tenses, crouches lower, but they are not a threat, only echoes of others navigating the same precarious existence. Each sound is layered with meaning. Danger, opportunity, companionship, loss. It is a language of survival, learned not in classrooms but in reeds and ice, in hunger and observation, in the silence between heartbeats. Even in the coldest stretch of this gray morning, the children move with a rhythm both careful and intimate, a dance dictated by necessity. Their eyes, sharpened by vigilance, catch the subtle tremors of frost-laden branches, the hidden puddles where ice is thin, the footprints of animals or men who might offer danger or fleeting sustenance. Every motion is a calculation, a negotiation with the merciless elements and the unseen society that refuses them mercy. As the boy rises, breaking the last crust of frozen bread, he imagines the river carrying his spirit somewhere beyond the reeds, past smoke and stone, toward warmth he cannot yet touch. The heron glides overhead, and for a heartbeat, the boy feels a kinship with the silent, soaring wings, a promise that endurance, though invisible, is sacred. The reeds sway, carrying his imagined song, his whispered prayers, his hunger, and his hope across the icy river and into the gray sky, where the world, indifferent yet magnificent, witnesses the quiet power of survival. And as he steps forward, leaving behind the faint impression of small feet in frozen mud, the boy carries with him the weight of countless untold stories, of ancestors who hid in shadow and still reached the light in fragments, of siblings who shivered beside him and dreamed of warmth, of hunger that teaches both fear and wonder. The river flows, the reeds whisper, the heron rises, and somewhere, just beyond the smoke and stone, A door waits. Not yet opened, perhaps, but inevitable in the grand design of endurance. The frost cracks softly beneath his steps, a reminder that even the smallest presence leaves a mark. And as he disappears into the thin veil of mist that rises from the water, the world seems to pause. A breath held, a moment suspended, waiting for the next story to unfold, for the next chapter to emerge from silence and shadow. Moonlight spills across the ruined courtyard, pale and brittle, painting the frost-laden stones with a ghostly sheen. The arches, once proud and towering, crumble into themselves, jagged shadows slanting across the uneven ground. Beneath them, children huddle, small and fragile against the vast emptiness, their breaths curling like smoke in the cold night air. They are the remnants of a life that once had warmth, the echoes of laughter long since swallowed by the silence of broken walls. Each face is etched with hunger, yet each pair of eyes holds a stubborn glimmer, a stubborn refusal to vanish entirely, even as the night presses closer. A girl kneels by the base of a weathered pillar, her fingers tracing the rough surface as though she could pull sustenance from the stone itself. She closes her eyes, pressing her palm as if it were a loaf of warm bread, imagining its scent rising into the hollow of her nose. The illusion does not satisfy her body, but it steadies her heart. Around her, the whispers of the children drift like fragile incense, prayers carried in quiet tones, half-spoken hopes that their absent mothers and fathers can somehow hear them. They speak of siblings lost to disease, to hunger, to the cold night, of stolen meals, scraps scavenged from the mud, of nights that stretch endlessly beneath an uncaring sky. Every murmur is a thread, binding them to one another, a tapestry of survival stitched with fear and love in equal measure. The wind moves through the tattered banners clinging to the broken towers, carrying the distant scent of smoke from hearths they are not allowed to approach. The banners flap, whispering the secrets of a forgotten power, symbols of dominion that now serve only to remind the children of what was, and what can never return. Somewhere beyond the walls, a lone owl marks the passage of time with a mournful call, its eyes glinting like stars reflected in the frost-fractured puddles. The puddle itself mirrors the heavens, its surface cracked into a mosaic of light and shadow. Even here, in the heart of desolation, beauty persists, fragile, ephemeral, a reminder that the world still breathes. One boy edges closer to the puddle, dragging a thin, frayed cloak around his shoulders. His reflection shivers in the broken ice as he studies the sky. He points with a trembling finger to a cluster of stars, and whispers a story of warriors who once strode beneath that same firmament, of castles that touched the clouds, of songs that carried across valleys in the wind. The other children lean closer, their bodies pressed together for warmth, ears hungry for the tales that fill the emptiness where food cannot. In their imagination, the frost loses its bite, and for a heartbeat, they are warriors themselves, strong, fierce, invincible against the cruelty that waits beyond the courtyard walls. A sudden scuff of movement draws the children's gaze to the shadows. A figure stirs near the archway. A child older than the rest, perhaps 14, carrying a bundle of soggy rags and brittle straw. She moves with care, avoiding the frozen puddles, her steps echoing against stone like distant thunder. She kneels among the youngest, offering them the meager warmth of her bundle. There is no scolding, no admonition, only the quiet, desperate generosity of someone who has known hunger longer than she remembers. The children huddle closer, pressing their cold hands against her own, the warmth seeping into their fingers and hearts. In the hush, they share a fleeting sense of safety, fragile as frost on the stones, yet as vital as breath itself. The night stretches, vast and indifferent, yet within its quiet expanse, a rhythm emerges. A boy hums a tune, low and trembling, echoing across the courtyard. It is a song of home, of hearth and laughter, of kitchens crowded with clattering pots and the smell of simmering stew. The melody is not perfect, voices falter, and chords break, but it holds a power greater than accuracy. It reminds them that life once moved beyond mere survival. Others join in, their small voices layering over one another, fragile but persistent. And for a fleeting moment, the courtyard ceases to be ruins. It becomes a sanctuary, a vessel of memory and hope, filled with sound and light that the moon can barely contain. A girl lifts a twig from the frost and scratches pictures in the frozen earth. A horse, a towering castle, a loaf of bread. The drawings are crude, but to her, they are blueprints for a future she cannot yet touch. The others watch, offering suggestions, adding their own marks, their own wishes. Together, they construct a world beyond the cold. A world where scarcity is replaced with plenty, where shadows no longer stretch with fear but with the promise of dawn. And when the wind blows and scatters their drawings, they do not cry. They bend again, tracing shapes, reweaving hope into the earth with careful, trembling fingers. Above, the stars will silently, indifferent witnesses to the small dramas below. Yet even in their silent gaze, there is a kind of acknowledgement, an understanding that what occurs in this ruined courtyard, beneath broken arches, is nothing less than defiance. Each act of sharing, each whispered story, each pulse of warmth pressed against frost, is rebellion against the void. The children are both fragile and invincible, shadows moving against shadows, creating meaning where none has been left, carving joy from scarcity, crafting courage from fear. Time passes without notice. The owl calls again, a low, mournful resonance that reminds them of the outside world. A chill deepens in the air, crawling beneath cloaks, nipping at toes and fingers. Still, they endure, bound by an unspoken contract of survival and tenderness. They speak less now, huddling into themselves and each other, listening to the quiet. The scrape of stone under nails, the sigh of wind through broken battlements, the distant echo of something lost. In the heart of night, they are still alive, still present, still insisting that their existence matters. As the first hint of pre-dawn creeps over the horizon, the shadows stretch long once more, but this time they are not purely of fear. There is a softness now, a suggestion of continuity, of memory carrying forward. The frost begins to glitter with the promise of light, and the children, tired but unbroken, look toward it. Their breath rises, mingling with the cold, a visible pulse of life in a world that would prefer silence. The courtyard remains in ruins, the banners still torn and forgotten. Yet beneath that decay, something indomitable stirs. The quiet, stubborn will to endure, to share, to imagine. And as the wind stirs again, it carries with it a subtle warmth, a hint that even in the shadows, survival writes its own poetry. A fragile, enduring light that will follow them into the next hour, the next challenge, the next chapter of a story that refuses to end.